One of the biggest struggles for people who are new to this exam is academic Task 1 writing. Sometimes we don't know where to start as all we see are graphs, pie charts, numbers. Is your brain getting scrambled already? Don't worry, let's take a look at all of this together here on episode 50 of Hacking IELTS.
Okay then, let's do it!
If you're joining us for the first time, I'm Chris, and this is a YouTube channel and a podcast dedicated to helping new and intermediate IELTS test takers understand the exam and attain higher results. Today, we're going to get into Task 1 academic writing of the exam, understand the main components, and what you need to look for when starting this task.
Yeah!
If you weren't with us last week, we looked at fillers and some expressions that are particular to native speakers depending on where they live, which is something called regionalism. Check out episode 49 to get more information on fillers. Now, I know it's not the most exciting topic in the world, but it's super important that we know how to understand and analyze charts and graphs, because it's not an easy thing to do, especially when you're new to the exam. Okay, are you ready? I'm ready. Are you sure you're ready? Okay, let's do this.
Heck yeah!
If we look at a basic bar or line graph, you'll notice that we have the y-axis and the x-axis, along with something called a legend. Now, this is not a legend like in stories or movies.
Is there anyone there?
Yes, what you see.
Iceberg, right ahead!
Thank you.
But rather a way for us to make sense of the graphic information displayed in the diagram. Look guys, it's really important that we understand what we're looking at before we start to do any writing whatsoever. Alright, so step 1, I want to take a look at the indicators, which are any words on the graph that describe and represent what we see. It might take some time to understand what we're looking at, so don't panic because it's a skill. And the more you look at and analyze graphs, then the easier it's going to get. It's just like anything we do in life. The more you practice and get into it, the more this is going to make sense, okay? Once we have a really solid understanding of the graph in front of us, we then need to determine what are the main trends or features that we're seeing in the diagram. It's really important that we don't just look at every single detail and then start writing about all the information that's on the graph. Instead, we want to only discuss what really stands out and something anyone looking at the graph will be able to agree is of significance. All right? Let's look at a line graph I've used with my students in the past about coffee sales in Canada. Of course, I have to use this example as a Canadian. Have you ever heard of Tim Hortons? If you're listening to the podcast, you can see the line graph for episode 50 on our YouTube channel. Okay, let's look at the prompt now. Oh, wait a minute. Do you know what a prompt is? This is simply the instructions for what you need to write on, and you'll have a prompt for Task 1 and Task 2 writing, along with the long turn for the speaking test. So, in the prompt box, you'll see the following. The line graph below shows changes in the amount of coffee ordered by Canadians from 1985 to 2015. Summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. Write at least 150 words. Okay, let's look at the legend. What do we see? What's on the y-axis? And what's on the x-axis? To review way back from episode 5, there are 3 basic requirements to organizing our Task 1 writing. First, we need to introduce the line graph. Second, we need to provide an overview. Do you remember overview from way back? Finally, we need to provide details about the graph. Let's start by discussing what the graph is about by paraphrasing. Do you recall paraphrasing from some of our last episodes? Basically, we just want to give the same information, but in our own writing style. You can do this by using synonyms and changing the word order. We also need to include the time frame as well. So, our paraphrase version of the line graph goes like this. The diagram compares coffee consumption by Canadians between 1985 and 2015. See what we did there? We just swapped out different words and provided the time frame for the line graph. Easy. Okay, let's move on to our next order of business, and that's to provide the overview. Do you remember how important it is to have this? No overview and you will definitely drop a band, guys. Let's start by identifying what the main trend is for this graph. Now, we don't want to give all the data here. We just want to find something that describes what is happening. The main trend we are able to see in this graph is that one type of coffee fell in sales over the entire time frame, while the other one took off like a rocket. Here's how our overview is going to look and sound. The diagram compares coffee consumption by Canadians between 1985 and 2015, a period of 30 years. Altogether, the purchase of coffee from McDonald's dropped, while orders from Tim Hortons increased. Remember, our overview can occur either at the introduction or the conclusion, but not in the middle, guys. Let's move on to our final step, and that's providing our details. Now, we can get really specific in the body of our Task 1 writing. Be sure to refer to the data of the graph, but also be sure not to just list off every single detail. It's super important to only compare how data is different or how it's the same. Do you recall in some of our past episodes how we discussed patterns? We need to group information by its type. What do we see in this line graph that is the same and what's different? In our overview, we already mentioned how McDonald's coffee dropped in the graph and how Tim Hortons coffee purchases increased dramatically. So, in our first paragraph of the body, we are mainly focusing on McDonald's and their performance over the time period. But we still need to compare data with Tim Hortons. Our second paragraph will discuss Tim Hortons to make our writing balanced. Let's look at the Task 1 response in its entirety, starting once again with our overview. The diagram compares coffee consumption of Canadians between 1985 and 2015, which is a period of 30 years. Altogether, the purchase of coffee from McDonald's dropped, while orders from Tim Hortons increased. So this was our overview, guys. Let's now head into paragraph 1. The most popular coffee with Canadians in 1985 was McDonald's, being ordered 120 times a year. This was significantly higher than Tim Hortons, which was only consumed 10 times a year. Apart from a 5-year increase from 1990 to 1995, coffee orders at McDonald's eventually plummeted to only 15 at the end of the 30-year timescale. In contrast, Canucks, or Canadians, visited Tim Hortons at a much higher frequency over the time period. Coffee orders increased at Tim's dramatically until it passed the consumption of McDonald's coffee in 1995. The graph indicates that Tim Hortons coffee sales rose dramatically throughout the 1990s and 2000s. Consequently, Tim Hortons coffee sales almost finished at the same level that McDonald's began, with no drop in consumption through this 30-year period. All right, there are a couple other things we need to keep in mind. First, a Task 1 writing response does not require a concluding paragraph. Remember, we only need to provide a concluding sentence in the last paragraph of the body. Second, ensure that you exceeded the word count, but are definitely not under 150 words. If you're short, you can always add another sentence as long as you have time. Okay, guys, this wraps up things for this week. Did this episode help you out? Let us know by giving it a like on YouTube and hit subscribe. See links to our courses in the description for this week's show. Take care, guys, and catch you in the next one.